welcome to TalentED, where again we share stories and insights from professionals making a difference in their fields. And I'm Dr. Eric Skansen, and joining us today on TalentED is Charles Williams, an education expert with 20 plus years of experience, going from teacher to principal. And here's the deal: Charles is dedicated to empowering urban students and promoting equity. And he challenges that negative narrative as a podcast host and a co-author. With CW Consulting, Charles delivers personalized keynotes, workshops, and consulting services, and to unlock that potential and deliver results. So with that, welcome, Charles. Charles, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're talking to us from, and why are we talking today? What's your passion area?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know how much more there is to, my wife always says, you never include like wife, father, like any of those things. So this is a great place to plug that.
Yes.
In addition to all of those.
Because we're humans, right? Like there's a human side to all of us.
Absolutely.
And we have to balance. We were just talking about balance, right? About how to balance family.
Yeah, it's necessary. And, it's interesting, I think, having my career has also been the time frame when my children have been growing up. So my youngest daughter is now 19. She's pushing 20. It's insane to say that out loud, but their experiences have really pushed me during my educational journey. Right? They pushed me into education. Being a father and a person within the field allowed me to see both sides of that, and I think that has helped to shape my approaches, my perspectives. And even now I tell families all the time when we're addressing issues, so just so you know, I look at this from both lenses, right?
Both lenses.
I get where you're coming from as a parent because I'm a father and I want what's best for my child, but I'm also looking at it from the lens of an administrator. And I think oftentimes in our spaces, we choose one or the other, right? Like in so many aspects of education, it's either or, but for some reason, I don't understand why we don't do a lot more blending. And so that for me has been, I think, one of the keys to the successes I've had of blending these different perspectives. Even like you were talking earlier, I do a lot of equity work. So I have this big session that I do. It's called the problem of color blindness. And I talk about my experiences being raised, quote, white. And people are like, wait, what does that mean? Right. And so I talk about, my grandfather, who was an Irish immigrant, Michael Patrick O'Reilly. Like, you can't get much more Irish than that. Like, how he raised me. Right. And so going through life again with that dual lens of, okay, well, I understand the cultural aspects and things that he gifted me, while also actually growing up as being a Black man in America. Like, what do those two things mean? And it's not one or the other, it's marrying those two, which has allowed me to navigate spaces where a lot of my colleagues haven't been able to navigate. And so, I've been able to sit in spaces and have conversations with people and get work done that needs to be done, that I think oftentimes isn't done because we're sitting on either or. And so that's, I think, the key to this is marrying, which was not the intention coming into this conversation.
No, it wasn't, but I love it.
It makes sense, right? It makes sense.
Context matters always. And, you talk about parents coming in and really connecting with them. I found that parents, sometimes they come in and they apologize for advocating for the kids. I'm so sorry, to talk to you about this. I always tell them, never apologize for advocating for your kid. That is your job. That is your job. And we are partners, and we're going to partner together. So I love that you bring everything into your space. And that I think that's what we're feeling when we feel your authenticity in your work, which is, again, why we wanted to talk to you today, Charles.
I appreciate that. In fact, I just met with somebody who met me at a conference. I was just speaking in Atlanta. And when we connected personally, the very first thing she said was, like, you feel authentic, like you feel real. She's like, I go to these sessions, I sit in workshops, and it just feels like I'm watching like a show or something. She's like, but you feel real. And I was like, well, yeah, like we're here having a conversation. Like I told you we could, right? But that authenticity is key.
Well, let's talk about, some of your passion areas. Obviously, you're an authentic person, and authentic people talk about their passion areas authentically. So, if you had to give us a passion area, what would it be?
So, I think in the world of ed, there's a lot of different things. But for me recently, I've married the ideas of the intersectionality of leadership and of equity. I've served almost half of my educational career now in the area of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's something that I can speak to. I've been out of the classroom for a while. So while I can still say, hey, I've got some tricks and tips up my sleeve, like that's not the area where I'm working. And so again, in being authentic, like this is my role. So I want to speak to those. And just the role that equity has played in those successes that I've had. And I know equity is like the buzzword and
Mm-hmm.
it's a little cliche-ish, but it's I think it's going to be interesting when the buzz around it dies down, who's left still doing the work. Because I
Mm-hmm.
think there's a lot of people jumping in because like, hey, there's opportunities and things like that. But once the I guess the fanciness of it wears off and it goes somewhere else, we're still going to be here doing this work. And so
Mm-hmm.
that is why, like, I have the podcast. We are hosting the show. I do the consulting. I've written a book. Like people like, why do you do so many different things? And the one thing that I always say is I have no idea how much time I'm gifted, right?
Mm-hmm.
On this planet, one, but also within this profession. So I'm going to do as much as I possibly can about this area that I'm passionate about so I can make as big of an impact as I can. So if that means, right, finding different avenues, that's what that means. Because one day I'm going to look up and I'm not going to be able to anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to be in that space saying, "Oh, I wish I did, or I wish I could have." I want to be able to reflect and say, you know what? Like I'm happy. I'm happy with what I've done.
Yeah, the trip is short. Enjoy it, right?
Absolutely.
And make it meaningful. So there's a deep commitment that I'm feeling for you around this work. So maybe as someone deeply committed to empowering this idea around equity or working with urban students, can you share maybe like a specific experience or project or something that stands out to you as a milestone in the CW experience?
Yeah. So, I think some of the roots of this, and I think it's important to share this, is that like I was an amazing student. And I say that like sarcastically, but I was an honor student. I was involved
Sure.
in everything. I was honors, like graduated at the top of the class. And for the longest time, I prided myself in that. That was a badge of honor that I carried around with me. Like, I graduated magna cum laude. I graduated blah, blah, blah. And I think in the world that we've created, it helped me in a lot of areas, right? Going off to college, applying for jobs, like those were things I carried. But once I started becoming an educator, I realized it was a very humbling moment to say I wasn't an amazing educator.
Hmm.
Like I was an amazing student. I just fit the mold. I knew how to do
You
education
played
for
the
the
game
way
well.
education. I played the game. That's all I did. And that's a really humbling experience when you realize, like, you as a person, you're not amazing at this. You just knew how to navigate that
Hmm.
space. And so then my thought was, right, once I got over serving that humble pie, right? Like, well, how do I then create that for all of my students? Like I want every single one of my students to figure out not necessarily how do they play the game, but how do I create a space that fits each of them,
Sure.
right? And so that's what I said, and I didn't realize at the time, like, well, this is equity work, right? So when I started looking at that, there's a phrase out there that talent is equally distributed, but opportunities are not, and it was that key in the area of opportunities. So one of the stories I share is when I was a principal at an elementary school, and we were trying to get a STEM program up and running, right? This is a predominantly African American neighborhood, poverty neighborhood,
Hmm.
far west side of the city of Chicago. I mean, like textbook urban, right? And we focus so much on ELA and math because we're a Title I school, right? And those of you watching, like in those schools, it's like ELA math because those are the tested subjects,
Hmm.
right? That's how you get your funding. And I was like, well, that's not fair, right? We need to flush this out. So if I'm being mandated to focus on those areas, let's create a STEM club. Let's create, some areas. Nobody wanted to participate, right? Because we don't do science. We don't do
Hmm.
like, no. So I thought, okay, what else can I do? So I'm one of those people that I push into spaces, right? I don't wait for an invite. I push into them.
Hmm.
So I would go to meetings where I was not invited, or they're like, oh, okay, this wasn't for you, but oh, okay, you're. And doing that, I started learning about all these opportunities that students from around the district were receiving. And I'm thinking, how come we didn't know about this? How come
Right.
nobody's telling us? So one of them was through Boeing. It was a rocket building competition. And so I said, I'm signing my kids up. And they were like, well, I said, no, my kids, I'm sending a group of kids. And I remember going back and telling my students, and they were like, what have you done? Like, you are setting us up for failure, right? And I think in times in education, like, we need to believe more than the people that we are serving, right? Like,
Hmm.
and to be honest, there's a part of me that was terrified. I was like, what if I do set them up for failure? But I put on the facade. I was like, you guys are
Hmm.
going to be
Hmm.
amazing. You're going to be great. And I sent them off. And there were 100 students from across the city of Chicago participating. And I sat nervously in my office, just kind of like waiting, right? The bus came back, and I was like, moment of truth. And they came running off the bus, and they're hooping and hollering. And I was like, what happened? And they said, we took third place, Mr. Williams.
Oh,
Third place. And I was like, see, I told you, right?
yeah, right.
Um, which was interesting. We had the STEM sign-up sheet that had said empty for almost 2 years. The next day it was full, because
That's
now
amazing.
suddenly it was, we can do this, right?
Hmm.
There was an opportunity to prove I have this talent, I have this skill. I just needed the opportunity to showcase that. The following year, now we get the invite back, right? Because now we're part of it.
Hmm.
So, but they're like, but you can't send the same group of kids. Fine, that's fine. So I sent two other groups, and a group of my fifth grade girls, right? Fifth grade girls, all black, go off. They come back with first place this time.
Wow.
We don't have a science curriculum in my school. Like, we don't, right? We're not a magnet school. We're not a specialized school. We're just your average small school on the far west side of Chicago. And so people started like, well, what are you doing? And I know this sounds weird, but I was like, I believed in my kids,
Hmm.
and I gave them an opportunity.
Opportunity
Like
is the word that came to mind.
that, I mean, it was very, and they're looking, well, yeah, but like, what programming? Like, how did you? You're not hearing me. Like, this isn't about the programs. This isn't about
Hmm.
all the different like resources and material. Those are important, but what's more important is I believed in my kids, and I gave them the opportunity to show what they knew. And now this becomes part of who we are, right? And I think that a lot of times that's what we do in education. We're like, well, let's buy the newest technology, let's bring in the fanciest programs, and then we're wondering, well, how come nothing has changed? Because it's not about those things, right? Hamish Brewer says it, right? It's about the people, and that's, I think, what oftentimes gets lost in education.
For sure. Opportunities. I, I once heard from a very brilliant leader who was sitting on top of everything. He said to the crowd, do not wait, lead from the middle. Do not wait for permission. And that has
Yeah,
stuck with me forever. And I
yeah,
think that's a great example of like, no, our kids are coming. I'm
yeah,
sorry you didn't give us an invite, but they're coming. Yeah, make somebody render that, right? Like, we're sending kids. You tell me no. Like, you sit in that space and tell me no. Nobody's
yeah.
gonna do that. Nobody's
No,
gonna do, they're gonna
no,
find a way
nobody.
to get those kids there.
And I think that's what people are terrified of, like the
Hmm.
no, but like, do it anyway, because you're right. Like, nobody wants to be the person who denied opportunities to students, like, not at least
Absolutely.
publicly, maybe
Right.
behind the scenes in the systems, right, which we talk about, but like, publicly, nobody wants to be that person.
Well,
So
what I
take
love about
advantage of
this,
it.
this kind of plays into the challenging negative narratives, right?
Mhm.
As an important endeavor for you. Talk about maybe your book or your podcast. Is there any particular highlights from those two pieces that really help reshape that narrative and inspire that positive change in our educational communities?
Yeah, so the podcast was launched, I think, when we're talking about this kind of thing. It's a mindset, right? So I think growing up, you go through your experiences, and you constantly hear the same conversations,
Hmm.
right? As a school leader, every year we have our like back to school leader convocation, and we
Hmm.
sit there, and part of that is like, let's look at the data from last year. We always know what the data is going to say. It's always, here's the gap that's there every
Hmm.
year, right? And so my thing is like, but why don't we talk about the other stuff? Like, we know that's there, but if that's what I go into the school year thinking about, then that is my perspective. My perspective shapes my attitudes. My attitudes shape my behaviors, right? And then at the next year, we're in the same space. Well, yeah, because I kept doing the
Mm-hmm.
same things. But if we start having these different conversations and highlighting the successes, like my young ladies, right, with a bowling
Mm-hmm.
competition. Now, mind you, I could have talked about the fact like that we were not state, city champions. We weren't allowed to go to state because we're at the elementary level, but like we were city champion, basketball champions. And that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sorry, like more often than not, when you talk about young African American males, it's about athletics.
Mm-hmm.
Can we highlight and talk about these? That's important. Let's highlight, let's celebrate that. But let's also have these other conversations because now we begin to think about these people in a different manner, right? I
Mm-hmm.
begin to think about the West Side, the Austin neighborhood of Chicago to say, hey, you know what? There's some amazing things happening there. And I don't think about necessarily, oh, I don't think Austin, I think violence or poverty or, any like
Mm-hmm.
it starts to shift mindsets. And that was the purpose of the podcast. So it's been interesting because I've had people on and they start talking about things I never even thought about. Casey, for example, was talking about like rural education. And he's like, Charlie, let me talk to you about rural. I've never been in rural education.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And he starts talking about it. I'm like, Casey, that sounds like what we're dealing with in
Some
urban education. And he's like,
similarities.
but you think rural education and you think something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start having those conversations, right? We've talked about like body sizes, like somebody talked about like classroom settings. Again, something maybe you don't necessarily think about. And yeah, like not all kids fit into those desks.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that say, right, about your spaces, right? So we talked about seating, we talked about like mental health, norming, and it's been interesting in that journey, just starting to shift the way we talk and think
Mm-hmm.
about things because we talk about these inclusive spaces, yet we only focus here, right? We talk about all, but we don't talk about each. So like it's been a great journey. And so the book was written then with this mindset for leaders to say, I don't care if you're a brand new leader starting off or you've been in the field forever, we need to stop, pause, and reflect on the work that we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So the book is written as a 40-week book. So like each week you could sit down, read a chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and somebody was asking me, well, is it research based? And I was like, yeah, it's research based, real life research. Like I'm
Practitioner.
not
Yep.
right. Like I'm not quoting, like inciting all of these. This is real life. And for me, that's some of the best research that can absolutely be done. So each chapter starts off with an experience, an anecdotal experience shared with a lesson learned from that. And then there's 5 different questions in different areas. Like how do we grow as a leader? How are we servant leadership, right?
Mm-hmm.
How are we celebrating our people? And so there's 5 different questions that force leaders to reflect and say, how can I continue to grow as a leader? Right? Because again, I think we get so caught up in doing school that we don't often stop and pause. And when we get caught in that cycle, it's exactly that. It's a cycle. We're doing the same things over and over and over again because we are. And then every year we're like, well, how come we didn't make the progress that we needed to
Right.
make? Right. And so I'm hoping that this book gives space to pause and to start changing the way we're thinking. Right. Again, so I change the way I think, I change the way I
Mm-hmm.
speak, I change the way I act. Right. So right, it goes from your heart, I mean from your from your mind to your heart to your hands. So that's the goal and the connection between like the podcast and the book. And then of course the work that I do.
And the work. I love the mindset shift from deficit thinking to abundance thinking.
Absolutely.
I think that if I can capture what you're saying there, it is focus on abundance and what's shine a light on what's right. Uh,
Yeah. I mean,
you better
everybody knows the deficits. Even the kids know their
they do.
deficits.
They do.
And if nobody talks about what they have, then they don't see what they have. Like, and so this isn't just for the school leaders, it's for everybody, including the students, including the
Hmm.
families, because once I start to look at myself differently, then I start to be a different person. So it's all around.
Charles, you better tell us the name of your podcast and the name of your book. Let's not go that
Yeah.
far and not say those things.
Yeah, so the podcast is called the Counter Narrative Podcast. It can be found on really any platform
Hmm.
that you listen to your shows. And the episodes drop every Friday. So one episode is an interview with an educator who's out in the field doing the
Hmm.
work. And then the other one is a reflection. It's literally just me sitting there talking into the mic for 10 to
Hmm.
15 minutes, sharing my ideas, my thoughts of things that are happening. The book is called Inside the Principal's Office. It's a reflective guide for leadership and learning. and that's on Amazon. So you can find it on Amazon, or if you want a copy, reach out to me. I'll be welcome to sign it and send off a
Yeah.
copy to you.
Well, that's big work, big work. And I know that if people wanted to work with you and bring you into their schools, into their districts, it would be a positive impact. I think everybody can feel that right now. I'm going to switch us though. I'm going to switch us
Yeah,
to something fun. We know a
okay.
little bit more about you and your work, but let's get to know even more about you. All right. So this is lightning round.
All right.
Quick response. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do this.
Coffee or tea?
Oh, coffee.
Beach vacation or mountain getaway?
Beach vacation.
Cat or dog?
Oh, neither. I'm allergic to both.
Ooh, both of them out. Okay.
Yeah.
Goldfish it is
Yes.
for Charles. Early bird or night owl?
Ooh, early bird.
Fiction or nonfiction books?
Uh, now nonfiction.
Okay. Sweet or savory snacks? Like what's
Mm,
in your drawer?
savory. Yeah, I don't do sweets, candies, cakes, pies, none of those things. My wife loves sweets. I do the savory.
All right. Introvert or extrovert?
Extrovert.
Movie night at home or go to the theater?
Ooh, movie night at home.
Pancakes or waffles?
Whew, maybe waffles. I try not to do the sugary carbs,
Mm.
but yeah, waffles.
City life or countryside?
Countryside.
Spring or autumn?
Spring.
Comedy or drama?
Ooh, drama.
Pen and paper or digital notes?
Ooh, pen and paper.
Pizza or burgers?
Pizza.
You gonna dance or you gonna sing?
Ooh, probably dance.
We're gonna go
Even
into
though I
the
have a nice voice.
universe, Marvel universe or the DC
Ooh,
universe?
Marvel, definitely.
Pop or rock music?
Oh, I guess rock music. Classic, like not, yeah, classic.
Classic rock. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Summer or winter sports?
Ooh, summer. Baseball. All the
Baseball's
way.
your sport. Okay, now I gotta ask: Cubs or White Sox?
Ooh, Cubs. Absolutely. I have a, can I show you something?
Yep.
So this bat, I don't know if you can see it. Javier Baez. This is one of his bats that he broke. So
Broken bat.
I have all sorts of Cubs memorabilia. So absolutely Cubs.
Okay. Action-packed thriller or heartwarming romance?
Ooh, action-packed thriller.
And
Unless
fine.
I'm watching with the wife.
Unless you're watching, then it's her choice anyway. It's
That
not
is her
even your
choice.
choice. Let's be real. Okay. And final question: walk-up song. You're coming to stage. We're playing a song that's going to pump you up. What's your walk-up song?
Ooh, man. There are so many. Um, right now, I think one that I really love, there's Pitbull,
Mm.
and he sings a song like I Believe That We Will Win. And I mean, like you cannot listen to that song without getting just like, and I think that's one of the things that we need in education, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we will be successful at this. We just got to keep doing
Oh,
it.
I
And
think
so
it fits
yeah,
your message perfectly.
absolutely.
Awesome. So we get to know a little bit more about Charles. Charles, one final call to action. What do you got for us?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, outside of booking me and bringing me in, right,
Right.
and helping you do the work, if I would say to anything, I just think it's important to figure out like who you are in this work that you're doing. And so one of the things I tell people all the time is like in this world, there's a lot of things that you can be, but the most important is to be true to you.
Mm.
So just know who you are, know how you're showing up, and be that person all the time. So that way, you're standing firm in your mission and your vision and your values. So be true to you.
That is a great final message, Charles. Charles, it is a pleasure to talk with you. I just
Eric.
really love hearing your insights and about being true to yourself and true to education. There's a lot of heavy work to do in our industry, and why not reach out for some help? We have to help each other, right? Nobody is a superhero. Nobody gets to do this alone. So reach out for that help. So
Yeah,
with that,
that's why we're here.
thank you, everybody, for tuning into this episode of TalentED. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave us a review. If you have any suggestions or future topics for guests, please contact us. We'd love to know. And until next time, be authentic, keep learning, keep growing, and stay PKS, which is positive, kind, and supportive. Goodbye, everybody.